Welcome back to Nighttime History. Tonight we're stepping through the centuries to explore the quiet sanctum of a medieval bookbinder's workshop as the sun sets over the stone buildings and thatched roofs. Thank you for joining me on this journey into a world where every book is born from weeks of patient labour, where the scratch of quill on parchment mingles with the soft sounds of leather being worked and pages being pressed. So settle into your favourite resting place, let the stresses of the modern world fade away, and allow yourself to be transported to a time when the creation of a single book was an act of devotion. The amber light of late afternoon spills through the workshop's horn windows, casting long shadows across the wooden workbenches. You breathe in the rich mixture of scents that define this space. The earthy smell of tanned leather mingles with the sharp tang of oak gall ink. Beeswax and linseed oil add their own notes to this medieval perfume. Most people think medieval workshops were dark and primitive, but actually many bookbinders positioned their shops to catch the best natural light, often on upper floors with large windows facing north for consistent indirect illumination. Around you, the day's work continues with practiced rhythm. An apprentice sits cross-legged on a low stool, carefully scraping a stretched piece of calfskin with a curved blade called a lunellum. The soft, repetitive sound creates a meditation of its own. Each stroke removes another layer of fat and flesh, slowly transforming raw hide into the pure white surface of vellum. This process alone takes weeks. The skin must be soaked in lime water, stretched on a wooden frame, scraped again and again, then rubbed with pumice stone until it becomes smooth as silk. The master bookbinder works at the main bench, his movements economical and precise. He's folding sheets of vellum into gatherings, groups of 4 or 8 pages that will be sewn together to form the book's spine. You might assume medieval books were clumsy and thick, but actually the finest manuscripts used vellum so thin you could read through it. The best Italian workshops produced vellum sheets that were translucent as tissue paper, yet strong enough to last 1,000 years. The workshop occupies 2 rooms on the second floor of a merchant's house near the cathedral. Downstairs, you can hear the muffled sounds of the street market winding down for the day. Cartwheels creak over cobblestones. Vendors call out final bargains. But up here, the atmosphere remains focused and calm. Wooden shelves line the walls, holding rolls of prepared vellum, bottles of ink, and wooden boards waiting to become book covers. Small drawers contain precious materials like gold leaf, ground lapis lazuli for blue pigment, and vermilion made from crushed cinnabar. A journeyman sits by the window, using the last good light to prick tiny holes along the edge of a vellum sheet. These guide holes ensure perfectly straight lines of text. He uses a small wheel with metal points, rolling it along a ruler's edge. The faint popping sound joins the symphony of workshop noises. Medieval scribes didn't write freehand as many imagine. They used complex ruling patterns, sometimes spending hours preparing a single page before any text was added. The smell of sighs fills the air as another worker prepares sheets for writing. Sighs is a mixture of egg white and vinegar that prevents ink from bleeding into the vellum's pores. He brushes it on with careful strokes, neither too wet nor too dry. Each sheet must dry completely before writing can begin. Rush this step, and months of work could be ruined by smeared ink. Let us pause here for a moment, dear listeners. If you're finding comfort in these gentle sounds and stories of medieval craft, I invite you to join our community of nighttime travellers. Please consider subscribing to the channel and turning on notifications so you never miss a journey into history. A simple like on this video helps support our work tremendously. And do share in the comments where you're settling in to sleep tonight and what time it is in your corner of the world. Now, let's return to our workshop as evening deepens. The master begins preparing for tomorrow's binding work. He selects wooden boards from a stack in the corner, running his thumb along the grain. Oak is preferred for large liturgical books, while smaller personal books might use beech or even thin sheets of beechwood laminated together. Contrary to popular belief, medieval bookbinders were sophisticated woodworkers. They carved channels for the cords that would attach the pages, created recessed areas for metal clasps, and sometimes hollowed out spaces to hold relics. On the workbench, cords made from hemp or linen lie coiled and ready. These will form the raised bands you see on the spines of medieval books. The bookbinder threads them through slots in his sewing frame, a wooden structure that holds the book's gatherings in place during binding. Most people imagine monks doing all medieval bookwork, but actually, by the 13th century, professional workshops in cities like Paris, Bologna and London dominated the trade. As shadows lengthen, an apprentice lights oil lamps around the workshop. The warm glow transforms the space, making it feel even more intimate. Fire risk was constant in medieval workshops. Bookbinders kept buckets of water and sand at hand. They stored the most flammable materials like turpentine and naphtha in separate sheds. One careless moment could destroy years of work and potentially burn down entire city blocks. The master demonstrates the saddle stitch to his newest apprentice, showing how to pull the thread through the center of each gathering and loop it around the cords. His needle is made of bronze, thin but strong, polished smooth from years of use. The thread is linen, sometimes strengthened with beeswax. Each stitch must have exactly the right tension. Too loose and the book falls apart. Too tight and the vellum tears. The workshop's architecture reveals centuries of accumulated wisdom about the bookbinding craft. Heavy oak beams support the ceiling, darkened with age and smoke from countless oil lamps. Between these beams, wooden pegs hold bundles of dried herbs. Rosemary and lavender help mask the strong smells of animal-based glues and leather treatments. But these herbs serve another purpose. They repel the moths and beetles that would otherwise feast on precious vellum and leather bindings. Your eyes adjust to the lamplight, revealing details invisible in daylight's glare. The main workbench stretches nearly 12 feet long, its surface scarred and stained from generations of use. This isn't just a table, it's an engineering marvel. The top consists of thick planks of aged oak chosen for their stability. Underneath, a complex system of drawers and compartments holds specialized tools. The bench height is precisely calculated. Too low, and the binder develops back pain. Too high and fine detail work becomes impossible. Built into the bench's far end, you notice a wooden book press. Two massive screws, each carved from a single piece of walnut, can exert hundreds of pounds of pressure. The bookbinder uses this to flatten newly sewn text blocks, to press freshly glued leather onto boards, and to create the crisp edges medieval readers expected. Most people think medieval books were crude and uneven, but actually, the finest specimens show remarkably uniform thickness and perfectly flat covers. Along the wall, a rack holds dozens of specialized knives. Each has its own purpose. The rounded tip knife cuts vellum without risk of puncturing. The curved paring knife shaves leather to paper thinness. The straight knife with its chisel edge cuts board. The tiny detail knife carves decorative patterns. A bookbinder might own 20 different blades, each kept razor sharp with whetstones and leather strops. Hanging from ceiling hooks, you see wooden frames of various sizes. These are stretching frames for preparing vellum. The fresh skin is attached with cords threaded through cuts around the edge, then gradually tightened as the skin dries. This process, called tensioning, must be adjusted constantly. Too fast and the vellum splits, too slow and it wrinkles. The frames themselves are works of art, with carefully turned posts and smooth sliding mechanisms for adjusting tension. In the corner stands a tall cabinet with many small drawers. Each drawer contains a different material, essential to the craft. One holds oak galls, those peculiar growths on oak trees that, when crushed and mixed with iron sulfate, create permanent black ink. Another contains chunks of white lead for making white pigment. Despite what many believe, medieval craftsmen were quite aware this was poisonous. They handled it with wooden spatulas and washed their hands in vinegar afterward. The bottom drawers hold more exotic materials, packets of gold leaf so thin you can see through them. Small vials of ultramarine, worth more than gold itself, made from lapis lazuli imported from Afghanistan. Vermilion from Spain. Verdigris scraped from copper plates. Bone folders carved from deer antler. Each material represents trade networks spanning thousands of miles. Your attention turns to a smaller workbench where metal fittings are prepared. Medieval books weren't just text repositories, they were treasures meant to last centuries. Corner pieces called bosses protect the binding when the book lies flat. Elaborate clasps keep vellum pages from curling in humidity. These aren't mere decorations. Without clasps, a vellum book will literally tear itself apart as the pages expand and contract with moisture changes. The bookbinder's apprentice works at this bench, filing smooth the brass corner piece. Metal dust glitters in the lamplight. He uses a bow drill to create screw holes, the drill bit spinning back and forth with each movement of the bow. This ancient tool provides better control than any modern power drill for such delicate work. The rhythmic squeak of the bow mingles with the rasp of the file. Above this bench, specialized pliers hang in neat rows, each designed for a specific task. Some bend wire for clasps. Others crimp metal around leather. Several have custom-shaped jaws formed by the bookbinder himself for unique decorative effects. Making these tools was part of becoming a master. You couldn't simply buy what you needed. You learned to forge, file, and finish your own implements. The workshop's stone floor shows patterns of wear that tell their own story. Deep grooves mark where generations of workers stood at the main bench. A worn circle shows where the grinding wheel sits for sharpening tools. Dark stains indicate where leather dyes regularly drip. Even the floor participates in the craft. Its coolness helps set certain glues. Its hardness provides backing when hammering decorations. Near the window, a curious contraption catches your eye. It's a headband loom, used to weave the silk or linen headbands that reinforce the top and bottom of a book's spine. Most people never notice these tiny details, but they prevent the leather from tearing where readers pull books from shelves. The loom consists of wooden posts with multiple hooks for holding coloured threads. The weaving creates patterns that are both decorative and structural. Storage methods reveal medieval ingenuity. Leather hangs from the ceiling in full hides, away from rodents and damp floors. But first it's been treated with cedar oil and wrapped in linen. This prevents the growth of red rot, a bacterial infection that can turn leather to powder. The best hides come from deer, called doe leather, prized for its softness and strength. Calf and pig provide everyday binding material. The exotic books might feature seal or even dolphin leather. A small furnace occupies one corner, cold now, but essential for many processes. Here, the bookbinder melts glue, heats tools for gold stamping, and warms the workshop on bitter winter days. The furnace design includes multiple chambers, one for charcoal, one for heating, one for containing sparks. Medieval fire safety was surprisingly sophisticated. Cities required annual chimney inspections and mandated minimum distances between furnaces and flammable materials. Shelves hold ceramic pots of various sizes, each containing different adhesives. Fish glue, made from sturgeon air bladders, provides flexible bonds perfect for attaching leather to wood. Wheat paste, cooked fresh each week, works best for paper and vellum. Cheese glue, made from casein, creates bonds stronger than the wood itself. Each has its specific uses, mixing ratios, and application techniques passed down through generations. The workshop's most precious items occupy a locked chest near the master's bench. Inside, wrapped in silk, lie the finishing tools. These bronze stamps, heated and pressed into leather, create the decorative patterns on book covers. Some show religious scenes. Others display geometric Islamic patterns, evidence of knowledge flowing between cultures. The most prized stamps bear the marks of famous tool cutters, artists in their own right, who might spend months carving a single complex design. The master bookbinder moves to a worn wooden table where the transformation of raw materials begins. He opens a ceramic jar, releasing the pungent smell of lime water. Inside, pieces of fresh calfskin float like pale ghosts. This is week 3 of their journey from hide to writing surface. Every few days the skins must be stirred, the water changed, the progress checked. Too long in the lime and the skin dissolves. Too short and hair follicles remain, creating a surface that resists ink. He lifts one piece with wooden tongs, examining it against the lamplight. The skin has turned from pink to bluish white, a sign the lime has done its work. Now comes the delicate process of dehairing. Using a blunt, curved knife, he demonstrates to his apprentice how to push, never scrape, the loosened hair from the skin. Each stroke requires exactly the right pressure. The wet hair falls away in clumps, revealing the smooth grain beneath. Most people imagine medieval vellum was thick and rough like leather, but actually the finest sheets were almost transparent. The secret lay in understanding that skin has a natural grain direction. Work against it, and you create a fuzzy surface that drinks ink. Work with it, and the result is smooth as glass. Master craftsmen could tell grain direction by touch alone, running their fingers across the wet skin to feel microscopic ridges invisible to the eye. The apprentice takes his turn, tongue between his teeth in concentration. His movements are still hesitant, uncertain. The master gently corrects his grip, showing how to let the tool's weight do the work. In the corner, finished vellum sheets hang from wooden clips, drying in the moving air from the window. As they dry, they must be constantly adjusted, stretched, and smoothed. A single wrinkle now becomes permanent. At another bench, the journeyman begins the mysterious process of ink making. He crushes oak galls in a stone mortar, the pestle making soft grinding sounds against the bowl. These galls form when wasps lay eggs in oak twigs. The tree's defensive response creates tannic acid nodules, the foundation of permanent black ink. But the process is more complex than simply mixing gall juice with iron. Temperature, concentration, and aging all affect the final colour. he adds the crushed galls to rainwater that has been collected in ceramic vessels, never well water, which contains minerals that muddy the ink's colour. The mixture must steep for days, stirred at precise intervals. Then comes the careful addition of iron sulfate, called copperers by medieval writers. Too much and the ink turns rusty brown. Too little and it fades to grey within years. The best ink appears pale when first applied, then darkens to deep black as it oxidizes on the page. The smell of fermenting wine fills one corner, where another type of ink is born. Red ink, used for important passages and decorative capitals, comes from vermilion or the cheaper alternative, red lead. But the binding medium isn't water, it's wine that has been aged until it turns to vinegar, then mixed with egg white to create a glossy, flexible ink that won't crack when pages bend. The proportions must be exact. Medieval recipes speak in terms of as much as a bean, or the weight of 2 pennies, measurements that made perfect sense to craftsmen who worked by feel rather than formula. You watch as the master prepares for the actual binding process. He selects a text block that has been sewn but not yet covered, running his fingers along the spine to check the tension. The cords stand out like ribs, each one anchored through channels carved in thick oak boards. But before the leather goes on, there's another crucial step most people never learn about. The spine must be lined with layers of linen and parchment, building up a smooth, curved surface that will support the leather and prevent it from cracking at stress points. He cuts strips of linen with practiced ease, each one slightly wider than the last. These are glued on in sequence using hot animal glue that fills the workshop with its distinctive smell. Not the horrible stench you might expect, but something almost sweet, like caramel mixed with leather. The glue comes from boiling pieces of hide, hooves, and especially the swimming bladders of sturgeon. Different parts yield different properties. Hide glue remains flexible. Hoof glue dries harder. Fish glue stays clear and is perfect for delicate work. The master tests the glue's consistency by dropping a small amount on his thumbnail. It should form a pearl that holds its shape but isn't rubbery. Too thin and it won't hold. Too thick and it becomes brittle. He adjusts with a drop of water here, a moment more heating there, until the consistency is perfect. This isn't written in any manual. It's knowledge held in the hands and eyes, passed from master to apprentice through countless demonstrations. Now comes the leather preparation. A piece of russet calfskin lies on the bench, flesh side up. The bookbinder begins paring it down with a specialized knife, shaving away paper-thin strips until the leather is thin enough to fold without bunching, yet strong enough to protect the boards. The sound is distinctive, like whispers against wood. Most people think medieval books were bound in thick, crude leather, but actually the covering on fine books was often thinner than modern paper. He works from the centre outward, creating zones of different thickness. The spine area remains thicker for strength. The turnings that wrap around the board edges are thinnest. The corners, where 4 layers of leather meet, are pared so thin you can see the lamp flame through them. This prevents the ugly lumps that mark amateur work. Each stroke removes perhaps 1/1000th of an inch, yet the difference between good and great binding lies in these invisible graduations. The leather must be dampened before application, but not soaked. The master uses a sponge and water mixed with weak beer. The alcohol helps the moisture penetrate evenly while preventing mold growth. He works the moisture in with his palms, feeling for dry spots that would resist glue. The leather darkens and becomes pliable, almost alive under his hands. This is the critical moment. Too wet and it stretches during application, then shrinks and cracks as it dries. Too dry and it won't conform to the board's contours. Glue application requires speed and precision. The master uses a brush made from hog bristles, spreading the hot glue in long, smooth strokes. No going back over areas which would cool and thicken the first layer. The apprentice stands ready with the prepared text block. In one fluid motion, the master positions the leather, smooths it down the spine, then works outward to the boards. His hands know exactly how much pressure to use, where to ease the leather around the raised chords, how to coax it into the tiny valleys between. A bone folder appears in his hand, its surface polished smooth by decades of use. With it, he works the leather into every contour, eliminating air bubbles that would later become weak spots. The bone makes soft squeaking sounds against the damp leather. Around the edges, he uses a smaller folder to create crisp, neat turnings. The corners require special attention, folded in a specific pattern that medieval binders called mitering, creating neat triangular tucks that lie perfectly flat. But the work isn't done when the leather adheres. Now comes the process of blind tooling, pressing decorative patterns into the damp leather using heated bronze tools. The master selects a small stamp showing a fleur-de-lis, heating it over the lamp flame. Too hot and it burns the leather. Too cool and the impression won't hold. He tests the temperature on a scrap, adjusting until the result is a deep, clear impression with slightly darkened edges. The apprentice watches every movement with intense focus, knowing that years will pass before he earns the right to attempt such delicate work himself. His journey began 3 years ago when his father, a wool merchant, paid the substantial fee to secure his position. Most people assume medieval apprenticeships were free labour, but actually families paid handsomely for the privilege. The master provides food, lodging, clothing, and 7 years of intensive training in exchange. You notice the apprentice wears a simple brown tunic marked with a small lead badge showing an open book. This identifies him as belonging to the Bookbinders Guild, protecting him from harassment by city guards who might otherwise assume a young man out after dark was up to no good. The badge grants him certain privileges. He can purchase vellum at guild rates. He can attend feast day celebrations. He can seek shelter at any guild member's workshop when travelling. The workshop hierarchy reveals itself in subtle ways. The master works at the main bench with the best light. The journeyman occupies a secondary bench near the window. The apprentice's workspace consists of a simple board across 2 trestles, positioned where he can observe while performing simpler tasks. This physical arrangement reinforces daily lessons about patience, observation, and gradual mastery. At 15, this apprentice has already spent 3 years absorbing the fundamentals. He knows 40 different knots used in bookbinding. He can sharpen any blade to hair-splitting sharpness. He recognizes the quality of vellum by touch alone, but he still cannot touch the precious materials or attempt finish work. That privilege comes only after demonstrating absolute reliability. One careless moment with gold leaf worth a month's wages would end his career before it began. The journeyman represents the next stage of development. Having completed his apprenticeship 2 years ago, he now refines advanced techniques while earning wages. Contrary to popular belief, journeymen weren't wandering workers, but skilled craftsmen employed at standard guild rates. His current project involves preparing a decorated initial letter, mixing ground azurite with gum arabic to create a brilliant blue. The guild strictly controls such formulas. Teaching them to non-members brings heavy fines or expulsion. Guild regulations fill thick volumes kept locked in the master's chest. These rules govern everything from working hours to quality standards. No work on Sundays or holy days, of which there are nearly 100. No beginning new projects after the bell for Vespers. No purchasing materials from non-guild suppliers. No teaching trade secrets to women, though this rule bends when masters have no sons and clever daughters who show aptitude. The master's own journey to this position took 23 years, 7 as an apprentice, 5 as a journeyman, then 11 establishing his reputation before the guild, approved his masterwork and admitted him to full membership. That masterwork sits on a special shelf, a gospel book with silver clasps and illuminated capitals that demonstrated his mastery of every aspect of the craft. Creating it nearly bankrupted him, but without it he would still be working for others' profit. Guild meetings occur monthly in the Hall of St. Christopher, patron saint of travellers, and, by extension, those who create books that transport readers across time and space. The master attends without fail, knowing that absence brings fines and suspicion. These gatherings serve multiple purposes. New regulations are debated, quality standards are enforced. Members accused of substandard work must defend themselves before their peers. The guild protects its reputation fiercely, knowing that one poor craftsman can destroy decades of accumulated trust. The apprentice accompanies his master to these meetings but must stand in the back, silent unless directly questioned. He learns by watching the complex negotiations, the careful diplomacy required when judging another's work, the delicate balance between maintaining standards and showing mercy to a colleague fallen on hard times. These lessons in human nature prove as valuable as any technical skill. Punishment for violating guild rules ranges from fines to public humiliation to expulsion. The journeyman tells in hushed tones of a bookbinder caught using inferior glue that caused bindings to fail within months. The guild made him stand in the market square wearing a paper crown labelled "Destroyer of Books," while the town crier announced his shame. His workshop was closed for a year. His family nearly starved. When finally readmitted, he never recovered his reputation. But the guild also protects its members fiercely. When the apprentice's previous master died of fever, the guild ensured his training continued without additional payment. When fire destroyed a member's workshop last winter, collections raised funds to rebuild. The guild maintains a fund for members' widows and orphans, revolutionary social insurance in an age when losing a breadwinner meant destitution. Knowledge transfer happens through carefully structured stages. First comes the watching phase, where apprentices observe without touching. Then guided practice on scraps and damaged materials. Gradually, they earn the right to prepare materials for advanced work. Only in their final years do they attempt complete projects under close supervision. This system prevents costly mistakes while building deep understanding. Modern learning often rushes through basics, but medieval masters knew that true skill requires years of patient repetition. The workshop contains hidden tests everywhere. That piece of vellum with a tiny tear? The master placed it deliberately to see if the apprentice would notice and set it aside. The knife left slightly out of position. A test of whether proper tool discipline has become automatic. These constant evaluations happen without words. The apprentice either develops meticulous habits or washes out within the first 2 years. Specialization within the guild creates its own hierarchies. Some masters excel at restoration, breathing new life into damaged manuscripts. Others specialize in tiny books of hours that fit in a noblewoman's palm. A few focus on massive choir books with notes large enough to read from across a cathedral. Each specialty requires different skills, tools, and supplier relationships. The Guild acknowledges these distinctions while maintaining overall quality standards. Women occupy an ambiguous position in this world. Officially barred from Guild membership, they nonetheless participate through family connections. The master's wife manages the business side, negotiating with parchment makers and collecting payments from noble clients. His daughter helps with simpler tasks, supposedly just until marriage, but actually developing skills that will prove valuable whether she marries another craftsman or must support herself as a widow. Several prominent workshops are quietly run by widows who maintain the fiction that their young sons are in charge. The evening meal brings everyone together in the living quarters above the workshop. The apprentice serves, another part of his education in hierarchy and humility. Talk ranges from technical problems to guild politics to news from other cities. The master shares stories of his own apprenticeship, carefully chosen to illustrate important lessons. How his master once made him redo an entire binding because one cord showed a quarter-inch deviation. How patience with a difficult client led to a decade of lucrative commissions. After dinner, while the master reviews accounts by candlelight, the journeyman tutors the apprentice in basic Latin. Most people assume medieval craftsmen were illiterate, but bookbinders must read well enough to arrange pages correctly and catch obvious errors. The apprentice struggles with verb conjugations, but persistence is another lesson the guild teaches. Every skill worth having demands years of patient effort. As full darkness falls, the apprentice banks the fire, covers the glue pots, and checks that all tools are properly stored. These evening rituals matter as much as morning preparations. A workshop left carelessly might not survive the night, rats nor leather. Damp corrupts vellum. Thieves covet even basic tools. The guild mandates these precautions, but good masters teach them as expressions of craft respect rather than mere rules. The apprentice climbs to his small chamber under the eaves, exhausted but satisfied. Tomorrow brings new challenges, new opportunities to observe and learn. In 4 more years, if he proves worthy, he will present his journeyman's piece to the guild. Then begins another stage of learning, earning, and gradually establishing his own reputation. The path stretches long, but each day adds another layer of knowledge, another small mastery, another step toward full membership in this ancient brotherhood of bookmakers. Dawn brings a special visitor to the workshop. Brother Thomas arrives from the cathedral scriptorium, carrying a leather satchel with exceptional care. Inside rest gathered pages requiring illuminated capitals before binding. The relationship between monastic scriptoriums and secular workshops is more fluid than most realise. While monks copy sacred texts, professional artists often create the decorative elements. The Church pragmatically recognises that spiritual devotion doesn't automatically grant artistic talent. The master clears his finest workbench, spreading white linen to protect the vellum pages. Brother Thomas unwraps the first gathering, revealing text written in perfect Caroline minuscule. Spaces have been left for decorated initials, their sizes carefully calculated. A tiny letter written in lead point shows what letter belongs in each space. These guide letters will be painted over or scraped away once the illumination is complete. The workshop's illuminator arrives shortly after. Master Jean trained in Paris before settling here, bringing techniques from the finest workshops in Christendom. Most people envision illuminators as monks working in silent devotion, but actually The majority were lay professionals who specialized in this demanding art. Jean examines each page against the morning light, checking for imperfections that might affect his work. A single grease spot from a careless finger can prevent paint from adhering properly. He begins by preparing his workspace with ritual precision. Small shells serve as paint containers, their natural curves perfect for mixing colors. A piece of glass, ground smooth on both sides, becomes his palette. Brushes made from squirrel tail hair, some containing only 3 or 4 hairs for the finest details, lie arranged by size. Most surprising to modern eyes, he produces a small knife with an extremely sharp blade. This isn't for cutting, but for scraping away mistakes, a common occurrence even among masters. The first stage involves applying gesso, a chalky base that creates texture and helps gold leaf adhere. Jean mixes powdered chalk with fish glue and a touch of honey, which keeps the mixture workable longer. He adds a minute amount of Armenian bole, a red clay that gives warmth to the gold applied over it. The proportions must be exact. Too much bole and the gold looks orange. Too little and it appears cold and lifeless. He tests the mixture on a practice scrap, adjusting until satisfied. Using a quill cut to a fine point, he applies the gesso to areas that will receive gold leaf. The letter P beginning the psalm will have its bowl filled with burnished gold. Tiny dots of gesso outline where gold stars will decorate the margin. Each drop of gesso must dry to exactly the right consistency before gold application. Too wet and the gold wrinkles. Too dry and it won't stick. Jean breathes on each spot just before applying gold, the moisture from his breath providing exactly the right amount of tackiness. The gold leaf emerges from its leather folder, sheets so thin they move with the slightest air current. Jean uses a special knife with a wide, flat blade to lift each piece. Static electricity, though medieval craftsmen don't call it that, helps the gold cling to the blade. He positions it over the prepared gesso and lets it fall, immediately pressing with a pad of soft leather. Excess gold scatters like fairy dust, carefully collected in a small box for reuse. Nothing so precious can be wasted. Now comes the burnishing, transforming dull gold into mirror-bright brilliance. Jean selects a burnisher with an agate tip, polished smooth as glass. He rubs in small circles, gradually increasing pressure. The gold begins to shine, reflecting light like liquid metal. Most people don't realize that medieval gold leaf was often thicker than modern varieties, allowing for more dramatic burnishing effects. The raised gesso beneath creates subtle three-dimensional modeling that catches light from different angles. With the gold complete, Jean turns to color. His assistant has already begun grinding pigments. Vermilion from cinnabar creates brilliant red. Azurite produces sky blue, though the finest manuscripts use ultramarine from lapis lazuli. The apprentice works malachite in a mortar, grinding until no grittiness remains. Each pigment has its own requirements. Some need honey added to prevent cracking. Others require egg tempera as a binding medium. The wrong combination and colours that look brilliant when wet fade or flake within years. Jean demonstrates the proper grinding technique using a muller on a marble slab. The motion must be perfectly circular, applying consistent pressure. Too much force and the pigment particles break down too far, losing brilliance. Too little and the paint remains grainy. He tests readiness by drawing the muller across the surface. Properly ground pigment leaves a mark like silk ribbon. The apprentice's attempts produce streaky, uneven lines that reveal insufficient grinding. The actual painting begins with the largest areas. Jean loads his brush with vermilion, testing the consistency on a practice strip. Medieval illuminators didn't simply fill in colours but built up layers for depth and richness. First comes the base coat, allowed to dry completely. Then modelling shadows mixed with brown or black. Finally, highlights using white lead or the base colour mixed with white. This technique, called colour modelling, creates three-dimensional effects that seem to glow from within. For the decorated letters interior, Jean sketches a tiny scene of King David playing his harp. Such historiated initials tell visual stories that complement the text, but first he must transfer his design from the pattern book. He places a piece of vellum over the original drawing, pricking tiny holes along the main lines with a needle. Then he positions this over the manuscript page and dusts with charcoal powder. When lifted away, a dotted outline remains, ready for painting. The detail work requires steady hands and perfect concentration. Jean braces his painting hand with his other hand, creating a stable support. His breathing slows. The brush tip, containing perhaps 6 hairs, deposits microscopic amounts of paint to create David's features. The eyes alone take 20 minutes, built up in stages. First the white, then iris colour, black pupils, white highlights that make them seem alive. Finally, nearly invisible red lines suggesting blood vessels. Border decorations flow from the initial letter like living vines. This style, called rinceau, shows Italian influence combined with Northern European tradition. Blue and red acanthus leaves curl and twist, sprouting impossible flowers and occasional whimsical creatures. A rabbit peers from behind one leaf. A bird perches on a tendril. These marginalia aren't mere decoration but carry symbolic meaning. The rabbit represents resurrection. The bird symbolizes the soul's flight to heaven. Jean pauses to sharpen his lead point, used for the finest details. Medieval artists discovered that silver produces finer lines than lead, though it tarnishes over time. He draws nearly invisible guidelines for gold dots that will outline major design elements. This technique, called pointillé, creates texture and movement. Each dot must be perfectly round and evenly spaced. The apprentice watches in amazement as Jean produces hundreds of identical dots freehand. Colour symbolism in medieval illumination follows complex rules. Red represents Christ's blood and divine love. Blue symbolises heaven and the Virgin Mary's purity. Green means hope and rebirth. Purple denotes royalty and penitence. Gold always represents divine light. But these associations shift with context. Red can also mean sin or hellfire. Blue might represent earthly water rather than heavenly realms. Master illuminators understand these subtleties, choosing colours that enhance textual meaning. The workshop grows quiet as afternoon progresses, everyone absorbed in detailed work. Jean adds finishing touches that transform good work into masterpiece. Tiny white lines along leaf edges suggest light catching their surface. Minute gold crosses crown flower stamens. David's harp strings are individual gold lines, each catching light differently. These details remain invisible at normal reading distance, but reveal themselves to close examination, rewarding careful viewers with hidden delights. As the decorated page nears completion, Jean makes final adjustments. A shadow deepened here, a highlight brightened there. He steps back frequently, viewing the work from different angles and distances. The mark of a master lies not just in technical skill, but knowing when to stop. Overworking can destroy freshness and spontaneity. He declares the page complete, setting it aside to dry thoroughly before Brother Thomas returns tomorrow. The spiritual significance of this work extends beyond mere decoration. Medieval readers understood illuminated manuscripts as windows into divine reality. Gold doesn't just decorate, but represents God's uncreated light breaking into the material world. Complex interlaced patterns mirror the interconnectedness of all creation. Fantastic creatures inhabiting margins remind viewers that God's creativity exceeds human imagination. Every element serves both aesthetic and theological purposes. Jean carefully cleans his brushes, knowing that dried paint ruins delicate squirrel hair. He stores pigments in small leather bags within a locked chest. Some are worth more than gold, representing months of trading negotiations and considerable investment. The workshop's reputation depends on consistent access to quality materials. One batch of inferior azurite can mark finished works as second-rate for decades. As evening approaches, the decorated pages are carefully stored between boards weighted to prevent curling. Tomorrow brings new challenges. A wealthy merchant has commissioned a book of hours with every page illuminated. The contract specifies minimum amounts of gold and ultramarine, protection against workshops that substitute cheaper materials. Such books take years to complete and establish a workshop's reputation across kingdoms. The master bookbinder and illuminator must work in perfect harmony, each craft supporting the other, in creating objects of lasting beauty and spiritual power. The master bookbinder opens his ledger, revealing columns of figures that tell the hidden story of medieval book production. Each entry represents negotiations, trade relationships, and careful calculations that determine whether the workshop thrives or fails. A single missal requires 24 calfskins for vellum, oak boards from specific forests, leather from tanners who understand bookbinding needs, hemp from rope makers, beeswax from monastery apiaries, and precious metals from merchant networks stretching to Bohemian mines. Tonight he tallies costs for the cathedral's new gradual, a massive choir book requiring materials worth more than a skilled craftsman earns in 5 years. Most people imagine medieval books were simply expensive, but actually their cost varied enormously. A student's basic text might cost the equivalent of a week's wages. A fully illuminated book of hours for nobility could equal the price of a substantial townhouse. The gradual falls between these extremes, costly but not ruinous, affordable through the cathedral's accumulated rents and tithes. The vellum alone presents complex calculations. Each double page requires 1 complete calfskin, and the gradual needs 300 pages. But not just any calf will do. Spring calves produce the finest vellum, their skin unmarked by insect bites or scratch marks from summer foliage. The master maintains relationships with specific farms known for protecting their animals' skin quality. These farmers command premium prices, understanding that bookbinders will pay double for flawless hides. A knock at the workshop door interrupts his figuring. The parchment dealer Heinrich arrives for their monthly negotiation. He carries samples wrapped in waxed linen, protecting them from moisture and handling marks. The two men move to the good light near the window, examining each sheet with practiced eyes. Heinrich knows every flock in the region, which shepherds take care to keep their animals' skins pristine, which seasons produce the best results. They haggle in the coded language of their trade. These show fence marks, the master notes, running his finger along faint scratches. Some are grazing, Heinrich admits, but the flesh side is perfect. They both know these sheets will work for practice or draft copies, but not for final products. The price drops accordingly. Better sheets emerge from deeper in the bundle, white as fresh snow, thin enough to read through yet strong as fabric. These command top prices, destined for the cathedral's gradual. The conversation reveals surprising trade complexity. Heinrich sources materials from a network spanning hundreds of miles. Italian workshops produce vellum so fine it feels like silk. German craftsmen excel at consistent thickness. English parchment makers create sheets large enough for enormous choir books. Each region's climate and livestock practices create distinct products. The master must understand these differences, matching materials to specific projects. Payment terms reflect medieval financial sophistication. Immediate payment in silver brings a 10% discount. Payment at quarterly fairs means standard prices. Extended credit adds 20%, but allows the workshop to take commissions before having full funding. The master calculates carefully, balancing cash flow against profit margins. Too much credit, and the workshop becomes vulnerable to client defaults. Too little, and they can't accept lucrative large projects. Their negotiation extends to future needs. The cathedral gradual is just beginning, requiring steady supplies over 18 months. Heinrich agrees to hold premium sheets as they become available for a small deposit. This forward contract protects both parties. The bookbinder locks in prices before seasonal variations. The dealer secures a major buyer for his best materials. Such arrangements, documented with carved wooden tallies that both parties keep, form the backbone of medieval commerce. After Heinrich departs, the master reviews other supplier relationships. The gold merchant Samuel visits quarterly, bringing leaf from Venetian workshops that specialize in beating gold to impossible thinness. 1 ducat of gold becomes hundreds of sheets, each capable of covering 16 square inches. But quality varies dramatically. Inferior gold tears during application or refuses to burnish properly. The master has learned to test each batch, paying premium prices for consistent excellence. Pigment acquisition reveals international trade networks. The ultramarine dealer Marcus travels annually from Venice, carrying lapis lazuli that began its journey in Afghan mines. The stones pass through Persian middlemen, Arab merchants, Byzantine traders before reaching Italian ports. Each handler adds their margin, explaining why ultramarine costs more than gold. The master must order a year in advance, estimating future needs and tying up substantial capital. Some materials come from unexpected sources. The best fish glue originates from Icelandic sturgeon, their swim bladders dried and processed by specialists who guard their methods jealously. Oak galls from Aleppo create superior ink compared to local varieties. Spanish vermilion produces reds that maintain brilliance for centuries, while cheaper German cinnabar fades to brown. Understanding these quality differences separates successful workshops from those producing inferior work. Client relationships prove equally complex. Brother Thomas represents the cathedral, but actual funding comes from multiple sources. The bishop contributes from diocesan funds. Wealthy merchants donate pages as memorial gifts. The Cloth Guild sponsors illuminated sections featuring their patron saint. Each contributor expects recognition, their arms or portraits incorporated into border decorations. Managing these multiple stakeholders requires diplomatic skills beyond mere craftsmanship. The workshop's most challenging client waits in the front room. Lady Margaret, wife of the Duke's Chancellor, commissions books regularly but proves difficult to satisfy. She brings her own ideas about decoration, sketched by court artists who understand nothing of technical requirements. She demands impossible deadlines, then delays decisions about crucial details. Yet her patronage brings prestige and connections to other noble clients. The master greets her with careful courtesy, knowing this conversation will test all his negotiating abilities. She examines sample pages from other projects, finding fault with each. The gold isn't bright enough. The blue seems dull. The lettering appears cramped. The master patiently explains technical constraints. Brighter gold requires thicker application, adding months to production time. More vivid blue means ultramarine rather than azurite, tripling costs. Larger lettering reduces text per page, requiring more vellum and increasing the book's final size beyond convenient use. Price negotiations reveal class dynamics at work. Lady Margaret considers haggling beneath her station, yet expects substantial reductions from quoted prices. The master navigates carefully, building cushions into initial quotes while appearing to make concessions. He offers options that seem like savings, but actually protect his margins. Less expensive leather bindings with decorative stamps mimicking carved designs. German azurite touched with small amounts of ultramarine for richness without full cost. Such compromises satisfy noble pride while maintaining workshop profitability. The conversation shifts to payment terms, always delicate with noble clients. Great lords consider immediate payment insulting, implying they lack creditworthiness. Yet extended terms can stretch years, with payment depending on political fortunes and personal whims. The master suggests quarterly instalments aligned with rent collections from Lady Margaret's estates. This practical arrangement avoids implying financial pressure while ensuring steady payment flow. Competition from other workshops adds pressure to negotiations. The master knows 3 other bookbinders in the city, plus travelling craftsmen who appear at fairs offering cut rates. But cheapest rarely means best. He shows Lady Margaret a competitor's book where inferior vellum already shows yellowing. The binding gaps where rushed gluing failed. Gold leaf applied over improper preparation flakes at touch. Quality justifies price, but clients must be educated to recognise differences. The workshop's reputation becomes its most valuable asset. Word spreads through noble networks faster than any advertising. A pleased client at court generates multiple commissions. A disappointed customer's complaints echo for years. The master maintains careful records of every project, noting special requirements and preferences. When Lord Edmund orders a prayer book, the master already knows he prefers German Gothic script and dislikes green in decorations. Students represent another revenue stream often overlooked. The university's growth creates demand for basic texts. The workshop employs copyists who produce simplified versions of standard works. No illumination, minimal decoration, bound in simple leather or even left as loose gatherings for students to bind themselves. Profit margins are smaller, but volumes higher. A single theology text might be copied 20 times annually, providing steady income between major commissions. Seasonal rhythms affect both supply and demand. Winter's short days reduce working hours, slowing production. Yet demand peaks as nobles commission gifts for Christmas and Easter. Summer brings better light, but suppliers struggle as livestock needed for autumn's slaughter remain alive. The master plans carefully, building inventory during optimal periods, negotiating extended deadlines when necessary. Cash flow management becomes as crucial as craftsmanship. The workshop's financial records reveal surprising prosperity. While not wealthy by merchant standards, Successful bookbinders achieve comfortable middle-class status. They own their homes, employ servants, and educate their children. The master's eldest son studies at university, planning to become a lawyer rather than continue the craft. This social mobility, funded by patient accumulation of workshop profits, challenges assumptions about rigid medieval hierarchies. Evening brings final tallying of accounts. The cathedral project shows acceptable margins if material costs remain stable. Lady Margaret's commission promises better profits but higher risks. Student texts provide reliable base income. The master closes his ledger, satisfied with calculations showing the workshop's continued viability. Tomorrow brings new challenges, but tonight's figures confirm that knowledge, transformed into beautiful objects, continues to command its price in gold and silver. The night watchman's bell echoes through empty streets as the master settles into his private study adjoining the workshop. Here, surrounded by books collected over decades, he contemplates the deeper purpose of his craft. On oak shelves, reinforced to bear their weight, rest volumes that travelled through centuries and across continents to reach this moment. Each binding protects not just pages, but entire civilizations' accumulated wisdom. He lifts a volume carefully, its leather binding dark with age but still supple from regular oiling. Inside, Aristotle's logic survives in Latin translation from Arabic, itself translated from Syriac, preserving Greek thought that would otherwise have vanished. Most people believe ancient knowledge passed directly from Rome to Renaissance Europe. But actually, Islamic scholars in Baghdad, Cordoba and Cairo kept classical learning alive during Europe's darkest centuries. Without their careful preservation and commentary, Plato and Ptolemy would be mere names. The book's margins reveal this journey through cultures. Arabic numerals appear alongside Roman ones. Geometric diagrams show Islamic mathematical innovations unknown to original Greek texts. A previous reader added notes in Hebrew script, probably a Jewish scholar who served as interpreter between Christian and Islamic intellectual worlds. These multilingual annotations demonstrate how knowledge transcends religious and cultural boundaries when preserved in permanent form. On another shelf sits a medical text that began life in Alexandria's Great Library. The original Greek vanished when that library burned, but copies survived in Constantinople. When Crusaders sacked that city, refugee scholars carried manuscripts to Sicily and Spain. There, teams of translators working in Toledo and Palermo rendered Greek wisdom into Arabic and Latin. The master traces worn pages describing surgical procedures Romans performed that medieval Europe had forgotten, knowledge recovered through books' patient testimony. The binding itself tells stories of preservation. Wooden boards from Lebanese cedar resist bookworms that devour local oak. The clasps aren't merely decorative but essential engineering. Vellum expands and contracts with humidity. Without clasps holding pages flat, the book would warp into unusability within decades. Medieval bookbinders understood preservation challenges their Roman predecessors ignored, which explains why medieval books often survive in better condition than ancient scrolls, despite being centuries younger. A smaller volume contains agricultural wisdom compiled by Carthaginian farmers before Rome's destruction of their civilization. The original Punic text vanished, but Roman landowners valued its practical knowledge enough to commission Latin translations. Medieval monks, needing to feed growing communities, copied these instructions for crop rotation, soil improvement, and pest control. Without their preservation work, 3,000 years of accumulated farming wisdom would have disappeared with Carthage's libraries. The master reflects on how differently various cultures approach knowledge preservation. Chinese printed books centuries before Gutenberg, but their bamboo paper deteriorates quickly. Islamic calligraphers created magnificent Qurans but considered printing sacrilegious, limiting reproduction. European monasteries combined reverence for hand copying with pragmatic willingness to adopt new technologies. Each approach shapes what knowledge survives and how it spreads. His most precious possession occupies a locked cabinet. Opening it reveals a Byzantine manuscript rescued from Constantinople's fall. Gold leaf still gleams on purple-dyed vellum, materials reserved for imperial documents. Inside, astronomical observations recorded by ancient Babylonians survive only in this Greek compilation. Star positions recorded 3,000 years ago allow modern scholars to calculate Earth's axial precession. Without books preserving these observations, understanding celestial mechanics would have taken centuries longer. The manuscript's journey to this workshop illustrates how knowledge rivers flow through unexpected channels. A Venetian merchant bought it from a refugee selling possessions for bread. His son, entering holy orders, donated it to a monastery. When Henry VIII dissolved English monasteries, alert scholars smuggled important manuscripts to continental libraries. This one reached Antwerp, where the master purchased it from a dealer who never suspected its true value. Books preserve more than facts. They capture thinking methods, reasoning patterns, failed experiments that teach through negative example. A treatise on alchemy seems worthless until readers recognize careful observation techniques that presage scientific method. Musical notation preserved in liturgical books allows performance of compositions silent for centuries. Legal codes reveal social structures. Account books document economic systems. Recipe collections preserve chemical knowledge disguised as cooking instructions. The workshop itself serves preservation through production. Each copied book multiplies chances for survival. When Vikings burned Lindisfarne's library, sister monasteries' copies preserved unique texts. When floods destroyed Cologne's archives, duplicate manuscripts in Paris maintained legal precedents. The master teaches apprentices this multiplication principle. Better 3 plain copies than 1 magnificent original. Beauty serves devotion, but survival requires redundancy. He opens a herbal describing medicinal plants, its margins filled with corrections by generations of practitioners. Original classical texts often contained errors, misidentifying plants or confusing preparations. Medieval copyists, testing recipes themselves, added warnings and improvements. This kills rather than cures, notes one hand next to a mercury treatment. Substitute willow bark suggests another, anticipating aspirin by centuries. Living knowledge grows through use, and books enable this accumulation across generations. Technical knowledge faces unique preservation challenges. A treatise on cathedral construction includes architectural drawings requiring precise reproduction. Errors in copying can cause structural failures. The master studies how medieval architects encoded proportional relationships in geometric figures rather than numerical measurements. This visual mathematics survives copying better than written formulas. Understanding why builders chose specific encoding methods reveals sophisticated information theory centuries before computers. Languages themselves survive through books. Without written preservation, tongues evolve beyond recognition within generations. Old English of Beowulf would be incomprehensible without manuscript bridges showing linguistic evolution. Hebrew might have become purely liturgical without texts preserving everyday usage. Books freeze language at specific moments, allowing future scholars to decode meaning across temporal chasms. The master contemplates deliberate destruction's role in shaping preserved knowledge. Library burnings by conquerors aimed to erase conquered people's identities. Reformers destroyed texts challenging their ideologies. Yet books prove remarkably resilient. Hidden copies surface generations later. Prohibited texts survive in refutations quoting them extensively. Destruction often multiplies copying as supporters rush to preserve threatened works. His collection includes a palimpsest, vellum scraped clean and rewritten when parchment grew scarce. Under lamplight, ghost letters of the original text remain visible. Ironically, such recycling sometimes preserved unique copies. The erased layer contains Archimedes' mathematical proofs unknown from other sources. Medieval recyclers unknowingly created time capsules, preserving beneath prayer books the very pagan knowledge they sought to replace. Climate affects preservation in ways medieval bookmakers understood intuitively. Italian workshops produced books with minimal binding, knowing dry conditions prevented warping. English binders used heavier boards and multiple clasps against perpetual damp. Recipes for ink and paint varied by region, accounting for temperature extremes. This localized knowledge, preserved in guild records, helps modern conservators understand why some medieval books survive perfectly while others deteriorate. The human chain of preservation extends beyond professional scribes. Parish priests copied sermons, merchants duplicated navigational charts, housewives transcribed medical recipes. Each act of copying, however humble, added redundancy to humanity's knowledge store. The master's own grandmother copied herb lore into a small book, preserving folk wisdom that complemented classical medicine. Such domestic manuscripts, overlooked by scholars, maintained practical knowledge through dark centuries. Wars paradoxically both destroy and preserve. Fleeing scholars carry libraries into exile, spreading knowledge to new regions. Victorious armies loot books as trophies, inadvertently saving them from later local destruction. The master's Byzantine manuscript survived precisely because looters valued its gold decoration. Had it remained in Constantinople, Ottoman conquests might have destroyed it. History's ironies include barbarians preserving civilization through greed. Book repair itself becomes preservation craft. The master learned from Italian specialists how to separate pages fused by water damage, revealing lost texts. Chemical treatments can restore faded ink. Careful rebinding saves disintegrating volumes. But each intervention risks damage. He teaches apprentices the physician's principle: first, do no harm. Sometimes benign neglect preserves better than aggressive restoration. Night deepens as the master returns precious volumes to their shelves. Tomorrow brings mundane work of copying, binding, decorating. But tonight's meditation reminds him of larger purposes. Each completed book joins an invisible library spanning continents and centuries. Knowledge rivers flow through his workshop, and his craft ensures they continue flowing toward futures unimaginable. The bell tower chimes midnight as he locks the study, carrying this awareness into dreams, where ancient scribes nod approval across time's vast distances. Morning light filters through the workshop as the master examines a damaged manuscript brought by monks from a flood-ravaged monastery. Water has fused pages together, creating solid blocks that could tear if forced open. He prepares a solution of warm water and wine, which will slowly dissolve the adhesion without damaging the ink. This technique, passed down through generations of bookbinders, has saved countless texts from water damage that would otherwise render them lost forever. The apprentice watches as his master carefully submerges a corner of the fused block. The wine's alcohol content prevents mold growth, while the water softens whatever substances glue the pages. Honey, spilled drinks, or simply time's compression can create these fusions. Patient work over days will separate each leaf. Most people assume water-damaged books are ruined, but actually medieval inks often survive immersion better than modern ones. The carbon-based ink bonds with vellum fibers, resisting dissolution. On the drying rack, separated pages reveal their secrets. This manuscript contains astronomical calculations from Toledo's scholars, blending Islamic observations with Christian calendar reforms. Marginal notes in 3 languages show how knowledge flowed between communities supposedly separated by religious conflict. A Jewish astronomer's calculations helped Christian monks determine Easter's date using methods developed by Muslim mathematicians. Books created bridges where politics built walls. The master points out subtle details that reveal the manuscript's history. Wormholes in specific patterns indicate storage in southern climates, where particular beetles thrive. Repair patches using different vellum suggest multiple restoration attempts across centuries. A burn mark on one corner might record a near miss during Viking raids or simple carelessness with a candle. Each scar tells stories of survival against odds that destroyed millions of other texts. His collection includes fragments that demonstrate how partially preserved knowledge tantalizes and inspires. Half a page describes Roman concrete that hardens underwater, but the proportions are cut off where vellum tore. Engineers spent centuries trying to rediscover this secret, finally succeeding through trial and error. Had the complete page survived, architectural history might have advanced differently. Sometimes preservation's failures teach as much as its successes. The journeyman brings news from the fair. A merchant offers a collection from a dissolved monastery, including texts thought lost forever. But authentication proves challenging. Forgers create fake ancient manuscripts, aging vellum with smoke and tea, copying scripts from genuine examples. The master teaches recognition techniques. Medieval ink has characteristic crystallization patterns. Vellum ages differently than parchment. Authentic books show consistent wear patterns impossible to fake convincingly. They examine a suspect volume, claiming to preserve Phoenician navigation secrets. The text seems plausible, describing Atlantic currents unknown to Mediterranean sailors. But tiny details reveal deception. The Latin uses constructions that didn't develop until centuries after the supposed translation date. Marginal notes reference mathematical concepts unknown when the book allegedly originated. Knowledge preservation requires not just saving texts, but developing expertise to distinguish authentic preservation from creative fabrication. The workshop's role extends beyond physical preservation to intellectual accessibility. A magnificent book locked in a noble's treasury preserves nothing if no one reads it. The master maintains relationships with scholars who commission copies of rare texts for wider distribution. A medical manuscript gathering dust in a cathedral library becomes useful when copied for university physicians. Democracy of knowledge requires multiplication, not just preservation. He shows the apprentice a project demonstrating preservation through translation. Byzantine Greek texts reach few Western readers, but Latin translations open them to thousands. Yet translation risks distortion. Technical terms lack equivalence. Cultural contexts disappear. The master works with scholarly translators, preserving original terminology alongside explanations. Future readers can reconstruct original meanings even as languages evolve. Indexing represents another preservation tool medieval scholars pioneered. Early books lacked tables of contents, page numbers, or alphabetical arrangements. Finding specific information required reading entire volumes. 13th century Paris universities developed indexing systems, adding finding aids to existing manuscripts. The master creates comprehensive indices for texts he copies, knowing that accessible knowledge gets used and therefore preserved through continued relevance. The apprentice practices creating a concordance, listing every significant word's location within a text. This painstaking work seems mere drudgery until its purpose becomes clear. Scholars seeking specific topics can find relevant passages instantly. Cross-references reveal conceptual connections. What seems mechanical labor actually creates intellectual infrastructure, enabling future discoveries. Medieval indexers invented information science centuries before computers. Storage methods affect preservation profoundly. Books lying flat compress unevenly. Standing upright strains bindings. The ideal angle, learned through centuries of experience, supports books at 15 degrees from vertical. Chains seem restrictive, but actually prevent theft while allowing access. Environmental controls matter enormously. The master maintains different storage areas for different materials. Vellum needs some humidity. Paper requires dryness. Iron gall ink deteriorates near copper. He demonstrates proper handling to a visiting scholar. Clean hands prevent oil transfer. Support the spine while opening. Never pull books from shelves by their tops. Turn pages from their corners, not edges. These simple practices, multiplied over centuries, determine whether books survive or crumble. Medieval libraries developed these protocols through observing damage patterns. Each rule represents lessons learned from irreplaceable losses. Pest control occupies constant attention. Bookworms aren't actually worms, but beetle larvae that tunnel through pages, following protein-rich glue lines. The master shows traditional deterrence. Cedar wood repels insects. Certain herbs placed between pages discourage pests. Regular handling itself prevents infestations, as movement disturbs larvae. Medieval librarians understood integrated pest management centuries before the term existed. Climate change over centuries affects preservation in unexpected ways. The medieval warm period allowed poorly heated scriptoriums to function year-round. The little ice age that followed stressed books as heating methods changed. Charcoal braziers produced less moisture than wood fires but created soot that darkened pages. The master notes how books from different eras show characteristic preservation challenges based on their environmental history. Book curses represent psychological preservation. Medieval scribes often ended manuscripts with elaborate threats against thieves or careless users. May whoever steals this book be cursed in this life and the next seems superstitious, but actually created cultural pressure for careful handling. Fear of damnation protected books more effectively than locks. The master includes mild curses in special commissions, knowing they add both charm and protection. Redundancy through format variation aids preservation. The same text copied as deluxe illuminated manuscript and plain student version ensures survival through different channels. Expensive books receive careful handling but attract thieves. Cheap copies face rough use but exist in greater numbers. The master produces both, understanding that diversity of format increases preservation chances. Memory techniques embedded in manuscripts reveal medieval understanding of cognitive preservation. Texts include mnemonic verses summarizing key points. Visual layouts create spatial memory aids. Decorated initials serve as memory anchors for surrounding text. These features seem merely artistic, but actually represent sophisticated understanding of how minds retain information. Books preserve not just data, but methods for internalizing knowledge. The master reflects on preservation failures that haunt his profession. Entire libraries vanish through war, neglect, or deliberate destruction. The Library of Alexandria burns in historical memory, but thousands of smaller collections disappeared without record. Each lost book potentially contained unique knowledge. He teaches apprentices that every preserved volume represents countless others that didn't survive. This awareness brings both humility and determination. Evening approaches as they complete the day's preservation work. Cleaned pages dry slowly. Rebound texts rest under weight. New copies progress steadily. Each action contributes to knowledge's river flowing toward tomorrow. The master knows most books he creates will outlive him by centuries. Some may survive millennia. This perspective transforms daily craft into sacred duty. Not religious obligation, but human responsibility to past and future. He locks the workshop with awareness that civilization depends on such quiet work. Without thousands of anonymous craftsmen preserving and multiplying texts, Renaissance couldn't have happened. Scientific revolution required accumulated observations, democratic ideals built on preserved political philosophy. Every cultural flowering grows from seeds preserved through dark winters by patient gardeners of knowledge. The bookbinder's craft, seemingly focused on material objects, actually maintains the invisible foundation supporting all human achievement. The cathedral bells ring compline as darkness settles completely over the medieval city. In the workshop, the day's labour draws to its natural close. The master bookbinder performs his evening ritual, checking each workstation with the careful attention of a ship's captain securing his vessel for the night. Every tool returns to its designated place. Glue pots are covered against the night air. Precious manuscripts are wrapped in soft linen and stored in their protective chests. These simple actions, repeated countless times across countless workshops, ensure that tomorrow's work can begin smoothly. The apprentice banks the fire, leaving just enough embers to ease tomorrow's rekindling. Orange coals glow like tiny suns in the darkness, reminding all present that even the smallest light can hold back the night. The warmth they provide goes beyond mere physical comfort. It represents the continuous chain of knowledge and craft, passed from master to student like flame, passed between candles, never allowing the light to fully extinguish. As the workshop settles into evening quiet, the master reflects on the day's accomplishments. 3 pages of the cathedral's gradual now bear golden initials that will catch morning light during centuries of services. A water-damaged manuscript has yielded 2 more of its sealed pages to patient conservation. A merchant's daughter's prayer book has gained its protective leather covering, ready to accompany her through life's journey. Each completed task adds another small stone to humanity's great cathedral of preserved knowledge. The journeyman carefully wraps the Byzantine manuscript that tomorrow will return to the monastery library. Its purple pages have been cleaned, its binding reinforced, its wisdom made accessible for future generations. He knows that monks will study these astronomical tables, perhaps discovering patterns that unlock new understanding of God's celestial clockwork. Every preserved book is a seed that may flower in minds not yet born, in centuries not yet dawned. Outside the workshop, the medieval city prepares for sleep. Merchants close their shutters. Guards begin their watch. But here in this sanctuary of bookmaking, a different kind of vigilance continues. The craft itself stands guard over civilization's memory, ensuring that hard-won knowledge doesn't slip away into darkness. Each completed binding is a small victory against forgetting, against the entropy that would scatter human achievement like leaves before an autumn wind. The master's thoughts turn to the larger rhythms that govern his craft. Spring brings new calfskins for the finest vellum. Summer's long days allow detailed illumination work. Autumn markets provide materials for winter's indoor labour. These cycles, observed for generations, create a sustainable practice that can continue indefinitely. Unlike the fevered pace of modern production, medieval bookmaking aligns with natural patterns that ensure both quality and continuity. He considers how each book they create joins an invisible library spanning all Christendom and beyond. A medical text copied here may save lives in distant lands. A mathematical treatise might inspire innovations in engineering. A carefully preserved chronicle ensures that future generations understand their origins. No single workshop can predict which books will prove most vital, so all must be crafted with equal care, equal devotion to permanence. The apprentice finishes his evening tasks and pauses at the workshop door. 3 years ago, he entered as a merchant's son knowing nothing of this craft. Now, he reads the workshop's rhythms like a familiar manuscript. He knows which woods make the best boards for different sized books. He can judge vellum quality by touch alone. Most importantly, he understands that bookbinding is not merely a trade, but a calling that connects past to future through the patient work of present hands. In the master's private study, candlelight illuminates the spines of accumulated wisdom. Each volume represents not just its contents, but the entire chain of preservation that brought it to this moment. Scribes who first recorded the knowledge, translators who carried it across linguistic borders, binders who protected it through centuries, readers who valued it enough to preserve. The books stand as monuments to human cooperation across vast distances of space and time. The workshop cat stretches and yawns, then settles onto a pile of soft leather scraps. Even this small creature plays a role, keeping mice from gnawing precious vellum. Everything in the medieval workshop has purpose, from the largest press to the smallest needle. Disintegration of all elements mirrors the manuscripts themselves, where text, decoration, and binding work together to create objects both beautiful and functional. Night sounds drift through the shuttered windows. A night watchman calls the hour. Dogs bark in distant streets. An owl hoots from the cathedral tower. These sounds have echoed through centuries, the same yet always different. Books, too, remain constant while their meanings shift with each new reader. A biblical commentary that once guided theological debate might later interest historians studying medieval thought. Preservation enables these transformations of purpose across time. The master extinguishes all but one candle, leaving it to burn safely in its holder. This light will greet early rising workers. a small comfort in pre-dawn darkness. Such tiny considerations for others' welfare characterize the best workshops. Excellence in craft extends beyond technical skill to encompass human kindness. The books produced here carry not just information but the accumulated goodwill of their makers. He climbs the narrow stairs to his chamber, joints protesting after the day's labour. Yet satisfaction outweighs fatigue. Another day has been added to his craft's long history. Skills have been transmitted. Knowledge has been preserved. Beauty has been created. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, but tonight he rests knowing his work contributes to something larger than any individual life. The apprentice, in his small room beneath the eaves, reviews the day's lessons before sleep. His fingers trace in darkness the movements of folding vellum, pulling thread, pressing gold. Physical memory embeds deeper than conscious thought. Years from now, when he trains his own apprentices, these movements will flow naturally from hands to hands, carrying forward techniques refined across generations. Throughout the city, other workshops undergo similar evening rituals. Scribes clean their quills. Illuminators carefully seal their pigments. Parchment makers check their stretching frames. Each craft supports the others in creating books that will outlast their makers by centuries. This interconnected community of knowledge workers, though they wouldn't use that modern term, maintains civilization's intellectual infrastructure through daily devotion to excellence. The workshop itself seems to breathe with accumulated history. In its beams and boards, in worn surfaces and darkened corners, generations of bookbinders have left their mark. The building has become a kind of book itself, its architecture inscribed with the memory of countless hands practicing ancient skills. Future craftsmen will add their own chapters to this wordless chronicle of dedicated labour. As midnight approaches, peace settles over the workspace like a benediction. Tools rest ready for tomorrow's tasks. Materials wait patiently for transformation. The great work of preservation continues even in stillness, as completed books silently maintain their vigil over human memory. Each volume is a small fortress against forgetting, protecting irreplaceable knowledge from time's erosion. The stars wheel overhead in patterns recorded in the astronomical texts preserved within these walls. The same constellations that guided ancient navigators shine down on medieval bookbinders, who navigate between past and future through their careful craft. Under this eternal canopy, the workshop stands as a bridge across centuries, a place where time moves differently, where patient hands can bind moments into permanence. In this quiet hour, the true magic of bookmaking reveals itself. Not in golden illuminations or clever mechanisms, but in the simple act of taking fragile knowledge and giving it durable form. Every book is an act of faith that someone, somewhere, somewhen will need this information. Every binding is a gift to unknown readers. Every preserved page defies entropy's claim that all things must fade and be forgotten. The last sounds fade as the city sleeps. But in workshops like this one, the vigil continues, not through wakeful watching, but through the patient presence of completed work. Books need no sleep. They stand ready at all hours to yield their treasures to seeking minds. The bookbinder's craft ensures this availability across centuries, creating vessels strong enough to carry wisdom through time's vast ocean. Tomorrow the work begins again. New pages will be cut. Fresh gatherings will be sown. Gold will be burnished to capture divine light. But tonight, in this moment of perfect stillness, the workshop rests in the satisfaction of purpose fulfilled. Knowledge has been preserved. Beauty has been created. The great chain of human understanding has been strengthened by another carefully forged link. Thank you, gentle listeners, for joining us on this journey into the medieval bookbinder's workshop. Together we've explored the careful craft that preserved civilization's wisdom through humanity's darkest and brightest hours. If you've enjoyed our work and are still awake, we invite you to explore our other historical journeys, each one crafted to transport you to distant times and places. And if you have fallen asleep, rest well and enjoy the campfire. May your dreams be filled with the whisper of turning pages and the gentle scratch of quills on vellum, carrying you peacefully through the night.